In the previous episode, we cut all the dado, set up the rabbets, and cut them. In this episode, we'll drill our shelf pins and dry fit the cabinet. I'm using my Rockler JigIt shelf pin drilling template here to drill the holes for the shelves. Link is in the description for you to check it out. Here I'm using a 1/4 inch rod to set the template in the appropriate holes. Here I'm just rotating the board around. Now what I thought about here is I stopped short because won't really need a shelf much more than that, but I didn't think about it and I went almost all the way to the bottom. I don't think I'm going to ever need a shelf that sits about 2 to 3 inches off the bottom shelf, but we'll go ahead and make this other side of this cabinet the exact same so it's a mirror, and then the rest of them will kind of space up a little farther. This Rockler JigIt shelf jigging kit works pretty good, no complaints. With that completion of this particular 2 sides, I now have about 6 more uppers to do. So in order to do these shelves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of plywood in the bottom that would represent the bottom panel, and then I'm going to use the Rockler JigIt shelf pin jig, and then I'm just going to act like there's no face frame here, and I'm going to use row A here to actually put these on. Now if there's a face frame, I would actually use row B, but it would sit inside the face frame, but because I don't have the face frame on right now, it's much easier to go ahead and drill these before you get the cabinet assembled, because then you're flipping the cabinet, you're doing it from the inside, stuff like that. So it's easier to do it when you have the sides separate. There's no need to really put shelves down this low, so I'll probably skip the first few holes and maybe start at hole number 3 and then maybe end at the very top right here. I'm also going to be utilizing this pin that I have laying around. It's a 1/4 inch, fits perfectly inside one of the holes, and that's pretty much all I'm going to end up doing. Let me get started on doing this and we'll continue on with our cabinet build. As you can see, this jig kit here makes drilling these holes out really fast. You can easily just rip right through them without having to really worry about measuring or anything. You want to be consistent, because otherwise your shelf alignment won't match up, and that's one thing that you definitely need, is your shelf alignment to match up. Otherwise they'll rock. That's how fast you can pour out 1/4 inch or 5mm holes for shelf pins. I'm using 1/4 inch. You can use 5mm if you want. It's a personal choice. I've always used 1/4 inch. 6 more uppers to go. Doing 2 sides for 6 uppers, I generated a lot of chips. These are 42-inch uppers, they're not standard 30. I did notice one thing, that the acrylic around the holes is starting to wear a little, as well as the bit right here is extremely hot after doing all that. Maybe I was moving too fast and that's why it's like that, but other than that, this jig has held up great. Before I assemble a case, I like to do kind of a sand down on them. It's easier to sand down the case sides, the carcass from the inside. I usually use 220 grit sandpaper, go over it lightly, not too much, don't want to burn through the veneer, but that way it's a lot easier than trying to sand all that stuff when it's already assembled. The one exception is where the face frame meets the case, and that's because the face frame will actually be flush. If I have to use any wood filler to fill in the crack, I'll have to go back and lightly sand that off without, hitting that, but overall it's easier just to completely sand this right now. That's what I mean by lightly sanding, just going over it with 220 grit sandpaper on any sides that will be exposed, whether it's the clear finish side or the painted side. I'll also do the back of the cabinet on the side that will be exposed with clear finish. Before I assemble any cabinet, I like to pre-sand everything, all the exposed surfaces, which has all been done on this, and then I like to dry fit it just to make sure everything fits out good. Non-exposed sides still have the pencil marking which tell where everything's going. So in the case of this is the top. So and to be exact, this is the front, and it's because there's a little bit of a void here. So I'll just slip these into place here. Sometimes the trusty old mallet works great too. Just bump them just a slight little bit to get everything aligned. I've actually put, the way I organize this is the lighter side of the wood. You can see this is much more grainy, and this isn't. The lighter side is maples on the inside, so I kept it like that. Dry fit each one of these joints. Make sure everything lines up. Back on. I ran out of storage when I was shooting the assembly, but this is what it looks like. Everything's fitting great, so what I'll do is I'll disassemble it all. I'll squirt some glue and brush some glue in each one of the cracks and everything, in each one of the joints, glue it all up, use some clamp and shoot some staples down the edges here and around the back to hold everything together. Make sure it's completely square, and I'll clamp the face frame on. I'm not going to attach the face frame at the moment. I'll clamp the face frame on, clamp the case up, and then let the glue dry, and then once it's all done, then this cabinet will be ready for the finishing step. So this looks really good. It's been pre-sanded on the internal side, which will be exposed. The external side will not be exposed to anything except for the bottom, but everything else will be not exposed, so I'm not worried about sanding it. The bottom, I'll just give a light sand over really quick, but everything else has been pre-sanded. The bottom will actually be painted white, and the sides over here on both sides will just be raw wood. There's not going to be any paint or anything on them because they're not going to be shown. The interior of the cabinet is going to be clear finished, so the natural wood color comes through. The top will not have anything on it either. It's going to go clear to the ceiling. I like to dry fit everything before I start, make sure everything fits nice and snug and everything's aligned and square, and then once I get going, then all I gotta do is glue it. In the case of this, since you're never going to see the sides, I'm just going to staple the top and bottom on, as well as staple the back on. You're never going to see those. There's no need for me to spend all the time pocket hole drilling and doing stuff like that. I used to use biscuit joint these to help hold them in, you know, pretty much all kinds of joinery, but ultimately I've circled back to just using staples for areas that are not shown. It's fast, it's effective, and it works good. Once I staple it up, then I'll put some clamps on it and it'll hold it. Once it glue sets, it'll be stronger than anything. I've seen people actually not even use any sort of fasteners and just glue and clamp, and by the time they're done, the glue bond is so strong you'll break the wood before you actually break the bond in many cases. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.